In 1513, a disgraced diplomat sat alone in his farmhouse outside Florence, banned from politics, stripped of power, watching his world crumble. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli, and while everyone remembers him for the prince, his brutal manual on seizing and holding power, almost no one talks about the financial wisdom buried in his writings, the lessons on money, taxation, and economic control that made rulers fear him more than any army ever could. Because Machiavelli understood something that most people still do not grasp today. Power does not come from the throne, it comes from the treasury. Control the money, and you control everything. Lose control of the money, and it does not matter how many soldiers you command or how loud the crowds cheer. You are finished. And here is the uncomfortable truth. The financial traps Machiavelli warned about 500 years ago are the exact same traps governments are using on you right now. This is not ancient history. This is the blueprint. Machiavelli lived through the golden age of Italian city-states, Florence, Venice, Milan, Genoa. These were not just cultural capitals, they were financial empires. The Medici family did not rule Florence because they had the biggest army. They ruled because they controlled the banks. Money flowed through their hands, loans, debts, interest. They did not conquer, they simply made everyone owe them. Machiavelli watched this system up close. He saw how power shifted not on battlefields, but in ledgers. A prince could lose a war and survive, but a prince who lost control of his finances was dead, even if he still sat on the throne. That is why Machiavelli's advice was not just about violence or deception. It was about money, and specifically, how rulers use it to keep you obedient, divided, and poor. Let's start with the first lesson, the one that terrifies every modern government. Never make your people hate you for taking their money. Machiavelli wrote this plainly: a ruler can survive being feared. He can even survive being hated for cruelty and war. But he cannot survive being hated for stealing the wealth of his people, because once you rob a man of his livelihood, you create an enemy who has nothing left to lose. Taxation, Machiavelli warned, must be invisible. It must feel voluntary. It must seem like sacrifice for the common good. The moment people realize they are being drained to enrich the ruling class, the moment they see through the illusion, the system collapses. Revolutions do not start because people are oppressed. They start because people feel robbed. Now, pause and think about your own life. Income tax, sales tax, property tax, capital gains tax, inflation, the silent tax that erodes your savings while governments print endlessly. Do you feel robbed, or have they made it seem so normal, so necessary, that you accept it as the price of civilization? That is Machiavelli's lesson in action. The best theft is the one you do not notice. But here is where it gets darker. Machiavelli also knew that rulers could not survive on fair taxation alone. Wars cost too much. Palaces cost too much. Loyalty costs too much. So, rulers throughout history have used a different tool. Debt. Not their own debt. Yours. In Machiavelli's time, Italian princes borrowed heavily from merchant banks. The Medici, the Fuggers, the Venetian financiers. They lent money to kings and popes, knowing full well those loans might never be repaid. But that was not the point. The point was control. A prince in debt is a prince on a leash. He cannot act freely. He cannot make enemies of his creditors. He must serve their interests or face financial ruin. Sound familiar? Because today, nations are not sovereign. They are clients. The United States owes over $38 trillion. Who holds that debt? Banks, funds, foreign governments, and central institutions that shape policy without ever appearing on a ballot. When a country is in debt, it does not govern itself. It governs on behalf of its creditors. Machiavelli saw this trap clearly. He warned that dependence on others for money is the fastest way to lose your independence. A prince who relies on foreign gold or loans from powerful families is no longer a prince. He is a puppet, and the strings are pulled by those who can call in the debt. But let's go deeper, because Machiavelli also understood something most rulers refuse to admit. Money is not real. It is a tool of belief. In The Prince and in his Discourses, he wrote about how rulers manipulate currency, debase coins, and inflate their way out of obligations. When a government owes too much, it does not repay. It changes the value of the currency. In Machiavelli's Florence, princes would mix cheap metal into gold coins, reducing their value while pretending they were still worth the same. It was fraud. But it was legal fraud because the prince controlled the mint. The result? Merchants and workers were quietly robbed. Their savings bought less, their wages stretched thinner, but the government's debts, denominated in those same debased coins, became easier to manage. This is not a relic of the past. This is monetary policy today. When central banks print trillions, when they expand the money supply to cover deficits, they are doing exactly what Machiavelli described. They are debasing the currency. Your money on paper stays the same, but its purchasing power erodes. You are being taxed without a bill. You are being robbed without a thief. And here is the genius of it. Most people do not understand what is happening. They blame inflation on supply chains, on corporate greed, on external shocks. They rarely blame the ones printing the money. That is invisible taxation perfected. Machiavelli would recognize it instantly. Now let's talk about war, because Machiavelli dedicated entire chapters to the relationship between money and military power. And his warning here is chilling. Never rely on mercenaries, because soldiers who fight for pay, not for loyalty, will abandon you the moment someone offers them more. Or worse, they will turn on you. In Renaissance Italy, city-states rarely had standing armies. They hired condottieri, mercenary commanders who brought their own troops. It was expensive, it was unreliable, and it was dangerous. Machiavelli despised this system. He argued that a ruler who depends on hired swords is weak, because loyalty bought with gold is loyalty that can be bought by someone else. But here is the financial twist. Mercenaries do not just cost money, they shape policy. If your military is hired, you must keep paying them, which means you must keep taxing, borrowing, or debasing currency. The war machine becomes a financial trap. You cannot stop fighting because you cannot afford to disband the army you have already paid for. Does that sound familiar? The United States spends over $800 billion a year on defense, not because the nation is under imminent threat, but because the system, the contractors, the bases, the supply chains, depends on that spending. It is a mercenary economy at scale. And just as Machiavelli warned, it traps the state in endless cycles of borrowing and war. The military does not serve the nation. The nation serves the military budget. And the people pay for it, in taxes, in debt, and in blood. Let's move to another of Machiavelli's insights, one that rulers today follow religiously. Keep the people divided, and they will never unite against you. In financial terms, this means creating classes. Debtors and creditors, savers and spenders, those who own assets and those who rent them. As long as these groups blame each other, they will never look up and see who is actually pulling the levers. Machiavelli wrote that a wise ruler plays factions against each other. He gives favors to one group, takes from another, and makes sure neither side realizes they are both being controlled. In modern economies, this division is everywhere. The middle class blames the poor for welfare. The poor blame the rich for hoarding. Meanwhile, central banks print money that flows to asset owners, inflating stock prices and real estate, while wages stagnate. The working class sees their rent go up and blames landlords. Landlords see their taxes go up and blame the government. But the real story is simpler. Money is being created at the top and distributed downward in ways that benefit those closest to the printing press. Everyone else fights over crumbs. That is Machiavelli's playbook. Divide the economy and you will never face a unified rebellion. But perhaps the most disturbing lesson Machiavelli offered is this: the appearance of wealth matters more than wealth itself. A prince must look prosperous, even if he is broke. He must fund grand projects, throw lavish festivals, build monuments. Because the perception of strength is strength. If people believe you are powerful, you are. This is why governments today build highways to nowhere, fund Olympic stadiums that sit empty, launch wars they cannot afford. It is not about utility. It is about spectacle. It is about making the population believe the system is strong, stable, and worth defending. Even when the treasury is empty and the debt is crushing, the show must go on. Machiavelli understood that economics is theater. The prince who looks weak will be overthrown, even if his policies are sound. The prince who looks strong will survive, even if he is bankrupt. So governments today do not fix problems. They manage perceptions. They announce stimulus packages, they promise infrastructure, they hold summits and sign agreements, and the public, watching the performance, believes the system is under control. But here is what Machiavelli knew, and what you need to understand. The performance only works as long as belief holds. The moment confidence cracks, the moment people stop trusting the currency, the bonds, the promises, the entire structure collapses. Not slowly, instantly. That is what happened in Machiavelli's own time. The Italian city-states, once the richest in Europe, were crushed not by stronger armies but by financial exhaustion. They borrowed too much. They debased their coins too often. They taxed their people into resentment. And when the French and Spanish armies arrived, there was no will left to resist. The money was gone. And with it, the power. Now think about today. The global economy runs on over $315 trillion of debt. Every major nation is borrowing more than it produces. Central banks are buying their own government bonds, creating money out of nothing to keep the system alive. Confidence is the only thing holding this together. Not gold, not production, not even military might, just belief. And Machiavelli would tell you this. Belief is the most fragile foundation of all, because once it breaks, there is no going back. Currencies collapse, governments fall, and the people who trusted the system, who saved in the currency, who believed the promises, are the ones left holding worthless paper. So, what is the wisdom Machiavelli offers you 500 years later? First, understand that money is a tool of control, not a measure of value. Governments do not tax you to fund services. They tax you to keep you dependent, manageable, and just wealthy enough to keep working, but never wealthy enough to challenge the system. Second, recognize that debt is a weapon. Personal debt traps you. Traps. National debt traps entire populations. And in both cases, the creditor holds the power. If you want freedom, you must minimize your dependence on borrowed money, because every loan you take is a chain. Third, see through the illusion of prosperity. Governments will build monuments while the treasury is empty. They will print money while calling it stimulus. They will promise security while inflating away your savings. Do not trust the spectacle. Trust what you can hold, what you can control, and what cannot be printed into existence. Fourth, never forget that the system is designed to divide you, rich against poor, savers against debtors, workers against owners. As long as you are fighting each other, you will never see the real game. The game is not left versus right. It is those who control the money versus those who do not. And finally, remember this. History does not repeat itself exactly, but if you do not understand it, it will crush you just the same as it crushed everyone else. Machiavelli watched empires collapse because they lost control of their finances. He saw rulers fall not to rebellion, but to insolvency. He understood that power without money is nothing, and money without trust is dust. You are living inside that same system today. The only difference is scale. The debt is bigger. The deception is smoother. The tools are digital instead of coins. But the principle is identical. Control the treasury, and you control the people. Lose control, and everything falls. So, if you take one thing from this, let it be this. Financial literacy is not just about budgeting or investing. It is about survival. It is about seeing the traps before you step into them. It is about understanding that when governments talk about your prosperity, they mean their control. And when they talk about stability, they mean your compliance. Machiavelli was not a hero. He was not moral, but he was honest. And his honesty is more valuable than 1,000 politicians promising you security while picking your pocket. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. And we are going to keep digging until you see every hidden mechanism, every buried truth, every financial trap they hope you never notice. Welcome to Untold Financial History. Let's make sure you are never the one left holding worthless paper.